Okay, picking up where we left off, we were talking about writing to a binary file. And hey, look, if I don't have it memorized, I don't expect you guys to have it memorized. Okay, the next one is the GUI events. So inside a graphical user interface, when you click on a button, it creates an event. When you move the mouse, it creates an event. So what can you tell me about that? Creating a scene. Now, I could make a joke out of that, couldn't I? But no. What's all involved in creating a scene? For example, what is the typical recommended order in which you put things? Okay, do I start with building the scene and then the stage, or how does that work? What's the order? Okay, where do I put the controls? The image class. Image class was a bit odd in that I thought it was kind of strange because they intended all the images to come from a URL, and I thought you had to go through an extra step to say no, this is actually really a file that exists on my hard drive. I thought that was kind of weird. Grid pane. So what's a typical use for a grid pane? If you have already started on your term assignment, well then you probably know the answer to that one. Event handler. So there's several techniques for doing event handling. One technique would be I just write a separate class over here and then I just point an instance to that class. No, that's it. We're over. We're done. Another technique would be to use what's called an anonymous class, and you actually write the code directly into where that parameter would be. In other words, on action, and then the parameter is what typically would be the name of the class instance, but you could just use an anonymous class. Okay. By the way, an anonymous class is just a class that you have not assigned to a variable, right? That's it. I mean, there's nothing special about the word anonymous class. It's not some mysterious thing. It's just I created a class, but I didn't assign it to a variable, so therefore it has no name. That's what anonymous means. Okay, cool. Input validation. So how in the world do you do input validation in the GUI world? Now, we spend an awful lot of energy talking about secondary input validation and primary input validation, blah, 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 blah. So here I'm talking about primary input validation in a graphical user interface thing. What do you have to do? I mean, how is that any different than the technique we've been using before? And then on chapter 13, I chose to use inline style rather than a separate CSS file. That's just personal preference. If you had already taken the web classes, maybe we could have used the other technique, but I was trying to be nice to you guys. So what are the rules and best practices for using inline styles? Okay, cool. Like, how do you have multiple styles? How do you do that? Cool. The radio button. How do you make a radio button work independently? Or let me rephrase that. How do I make a group of radio buttons work independently from another group? That'd be a good question. And the radio button state. If all you did was just put a bunch of radio buttons in there, you probably have a state validation error because the machine would start up in an impossible state where none of the things were selected. So how do you fix that? What's the point here? What is a state violation? Hey, what's the difference between a radio button and a checkbox? That's a good question. The menu bar. So the menu bar typically, like most applications, like what we have here, a notepad, but at the top it says, CIS3332, finaltopics.txt. So it's at the top. So what type of container should I put a menu bar in to make it always go to the top? That'd be a good question. The file chooser. One of the things that's kind of odd about the file chooser is one of the few scenarios where I have to pass my stage to this guy. And this is a geeky question, but why do I have to do that? Why do I have to pass the stage off to something else is going to create another window. Colors. So I may ask you something simple, or I may ask you like, how do you set the interior color of a text field? You know, it may be generic or maybe extraordinarily specific on how do you do one little thing. The media player. So is this one of those things where the media player is a visible control, or is that just something else? Is there a combination of controls it takes to be able to pull this off? Keyboard events. So if remember, there's like key pressed and key released, and key type, those kind of things. So if you remember that the keyboard events basically has 3 different types of events, sub-events, subtypes. I'm not sure what you'd call it. But anyway, the point is keyboard. There's lots of keyboard events, so we'll look that up. And the extra credit questions. One is passing data. I want to pass data to and from a class. What are my choices? How do I pass data to a class? And then how do I get data from a class? Yeah, that's a good question. And when you answer this, and make sure you cover both the to and the from. And then the last one is yet another one of those philosophical, why the heck are we doing this? What's the point of object-oriented programming? It's got to have some reason. Otherwise, no one would be doing it, right? It's got to be some reason for it. Okay, that's all there is on the list. I hope you guys do study well, do well on the exam, and heck, maybe I'll see you guys in some future class.